Warning: the Curious Native podcast contains mature topics and themes that are intended for an older youth and adult audience. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey, welcome to the Curious Native Podcast. I'm your host, hunnasmak, and welcome back. It's been a little while since I recorded a podcast episode, but that has to do with the fact that my mic's broken, and I have to find time to record. So I'm using my little shitty mic right now, so apologies to everybody listening. But in today's episode, we're going to be covering something that we lightly covered and touched on in past episodes, such as, I think it's the appropriation of voodoo in literature, I think it was. I don't know if I did that episode or if it was movies. I don't know, it's been a minute, so all I know is I've covered this lightly in the past. And that thing is race and horror. I have 100% talked about it, at least somewhat. Horror, an intriguing and, perplexing genre, has long been intertwined with issues of race. Throughout history, horror films predominantly depicted black people as the villain, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and feeding into racial biases. However, in recent years, there has been a noteworthy shift in the genre, with films like Candyman, Bones, and Blackula challenging these conventions and offering a more nuanced portrayal of black individuals. These movies provide us with a sympathetic villain reminiscent of Frankenstein's monster and prompts us to re-examine our preconceived notions of horror. For far too long, horror films have perpetuated negative stereotypes and perpetuated racism by portraying black people as the default villains. This depiction has perpetuated racial biases and reinforced underlying fears and prejudices within society. However, it is essential to note that these films are not representative of reality and should not be taken as accurate portrayals of the black community. In recent years, we've had movies like Candyman, both the original and the remake. The remake, directed by Nia DaCosta, has emerged as a significant turning point in the genre. This film tells stories of mesmerizing supernatural figure, but it goes beyond traditional horror conventions by exploring race, history, and collective trauma. Candyman challenges viewers' beliefs and forces them to confront the often glossed over aspects of racial injustice. I also think this one challenges more so, like the romanticization of it, because in that first one, it is very much not only a horror and like a thriller drama, but it also very much there's a romanticization of the fact that Candyman in the original movie was a slave who was killed. There was a lot of like weird, glamorization of that. So I did appreciate Nia DaCosta's Candyman for somewhat covering that, or doing it in a way that isn't romanticizing actual genocide and slavery. So another film that subverts traditional horror tropes is Bones, directed by Ernest Dickerson. Unlike its predecessor, Bones presents a complex narrative that delves into the ghastly past of the black community. It showcases a horrifying consequences of gentrification and urban decay, all all the while providing the audience with a sympathetic perspective on the titular character. Blackula, an iconic film of the blaxploitation era, features a vampire protagonist who, despite his monstrous nature, excuse me, he elicits empathy from the viewers by taking inspiration from Shelley's Frankenstein. This film offers a deeper exploration of the tragic impulses and loneliness that often drives its monstrous characters. These movies herald a new era in the horror cinema, portraying black individuals as more than mere villains. They humanize their characters, highlighting their struggles, their history, and their connection to larger societal injustices. This shift invites viewers to question their own biases and reflect on the harmful impact that traditional horror films have had on racial perceptions. In this episode, we will dive deeper into the significance of these groundbreaking films, analyzing the impacts they have had on not only the genre, but also on societal discussions around race. We explore how these movies have challenged the status quo and elevated the representation of black individuals in horror. Furthermore, we discuss the legacy of Frankenstein's monster and its influence on the sympathetic portrayal of black villains. Just like Dr. Frankenstein's creation, these these characters are born out of societal neglect, abandonment, and discrimination. By exploring their backstories and motivations, these films force audiences to question their own prejudices and challenge the traditional notions of who the real monsters are. Through this podcast episode, we aim to shed light on the evolution of horror cinema and its relationship with race. We invite you to join us on this exploration as we unravel the significance of Candyman, Bones, and Blackula in subverting the conventional horror archetype and offering a more compassionate perspective of the villainous figure. So, if you are interested in understanding how these films have contributed to the reshaping of horror and how they continue to push boundaries for a more inclusive and empathetic genre, please keep on listening. In 1972, the world was first introduced to Blackula, a unique take on the classic vampire tale that featured a black protagonist in the leading role. Played by actor William Marshall, Blackula was quickly became a cult favorite and has since been credited with creating the sympathetic black villain that has gone on to influence countless other characters in popular culture. Very much like a Frankenstein monsters type of vibe, where it's sympathetic in the sense that you feel bad for what happened to him, especially since he was turned by Dracula in the beginning of the film and put in a freaking box, and his love got taken from him, and then he was reincarnated and she was reincarnated. It was a whole thing. You guys gotta watch the movie. It's a great freaking movie. Blackula, directed by William Crane, tells the story of an African prince named Mamu Waldi. I do not know if I'm pronouncing it correct. I can't remember. It's been a minute. Who is turned into a vampire by Count Dracula in the 18th century. Blackula is later resurrected in 1972 and struggles with his vampire nature while seeking revenge on those who wronged him in the past. What sets Blackula apart from other vampire films of the time is its unique portrayal of a sympathetic black villain. Blackula is not simply a mindless monster, but a complex character with a tragic backstory and desire for justice. The character of Blackula was groundbreaking for its time, challenging traditional stereotypes and creating a new archetype for black villains in popular culture. Blackula's portrayal as a sympathetic and multifaceted character paved the way for future black villains to be more than just a one-dimensional bad guy. This shift in portrayal allowed for a more nuanced and humanized representation in black characters in the horror genre, specifically I'm talking about. Breaking away from the typical villainous role they were often relegated to. One such character that was heavily influenced by Blackula is Candyman, portrayed by actor Tony Todd in the 1992 film of the same name. Candyman, like Blackula, is a complex and tragic figure who is more than just a villain. He is a tormented soul seeking justice and revenge, and his character embodies, the same sympathetic qualities that made Blackula so iconic. He was just in love, and dude got freaking tortured, had honey put on him, had his hand freaking cut off. Like, what the fuck, dude? So, he's definitely a sympathetic villain, because he does come back and, terrorizes Cabrini Green, which, that freaking sucks. But the influence of Blackula on Candyman is Candyman. Candyman country. Oh no. I'm gonna say it again, y'all. The influence of Blackula on Candyman Jesus is evident in both characters' ability to evoke empathy and challenge traditional notions of villainy. The creation of Blackula and the subsequent influence it had on characters like Candyman has had a lasting impact on the horror genre and popular culture as a whole. These characters have not only provided audiences with compelling and thought-provoking stories, but they have also expanded the representation of black characters in a genre that has often marginalized them. Blackula's role in creating, the sympathetic black villain has paved the way for more diverse and complex portrayals of black characters in horror, opening the doors for narratives and perspectives to be explored. Blackula and his portrayal of the sympathetic black villain have a profound impact on the horror genre and popular culture, and it's and characters' complexity and humanity have challenged the traditional stereotypes that have been set and have set a new standard for the representation of black characters in film. Blackula's influence can be seen in iconic characters like Candyman, who continue to challenge and expand portrayals of black villains in popular culture. Also, Blackula is a film that has often been categorized within the blaxploitation genre, a term used to describe films that were specifically made to cater to African American audiences during the 1970s. However, despite being part of this genre, Blackula challenged conventional norms in relation to cinema in several ways. Firstly, Blackula challenged the conventional norms of cinema by providing black African American actors with leading roles. During the 1970s, it was rare to see black actors in significant roles, let alone as the protagonist of the film. Blackula, played by William Marshall, not only took centered stage but also depicted a complex character with depth and emotion. This was a significant departure from the stereotypical and often derogatory roles that were often typically given to black actors at the time, and it paved the way for greater representation in the film industry. In addition to providing a platform to black actors, Blackula also challenged the conventional norms by offering a unique take on the vampire genre. I completely read the other sentence wrong, but it still worked somehow. It is late. Rather than simply retelling the story of Dracula with a black cast, the film incorporated elements of black American folklore, African folklore, and cultural references to create a distinct narrative. This not only added depth to the story, but also reflected on issues of race and identity, which were rarely explored in mainstream cinema at the time. Furthermore, Blackula challenged conventional norms in its portrayal of the vampire as a sympathetic and even romantic figure, which we've kind of had romantic portrayals of vampires in the past, of even Dracula in his first portrayal, like the big one that we all know of. But in the book, he's gross in the book, I'm telling you guys. Traditionally, vampires have been depicted as monstrous and evil creatures, like Dracula, like I mentioned, gross. But Blackula offered a more nuanced portrayal. The character of Blackula struggled with his own identity and the consequences of his curse, although he does declare himself as Blackula. So that's pretty hardcore. Which made him a more complex and relatable figure. The departure from the typical portrayal of vampires have added a new layer of depth to the genre and challenged traditional stereotypes. Despite being part of the blaxploitation genre, Blackula was a groundbreaking film that challenged conventional norms in relation to cinema. It provided African American actors with leading roles, offered a unique take on the vampire genre, and portrayed the vampire as a sympathetic figure. By doing so, the film not only contributed to greater diversity in the representation in the film industry, but also paved the way for more inclusive and thought-provoking storytelling, which, in my humble opinion, leads us to the next film that on the list that I wanted to talk about and have been mentioning offhand for the last couple minutes now, which is Candyman. The movie Candyman is a horror film released in 1992, directed by Bernard Rose and based on a short story by Clive Barker called The Forbidden. The film explores the urban legend of the Candyman, a vengeful spirit who can be summoned by saying his name 5 times in front of a mirror. The brilliance of the movie lies in its decision to change the message of the story to be race-based rather than class-based, especially since it is set in the United States. By focusing on issues of race and racism, the film tackles deeper societal issues and shed light on the experience of African Americans in a predominantly white society. In the film, the legend of the Candyman is based on an African American man named Daniel Robitel, who was brutally murdered for falling in love with a white woman in the 19th century. The historical context of racism and tragic love story forms the backbone of the film's narrative, allowing it to delve into themes of race relations and the legacy of slavery in America. By making the Candyman a figure haunted by racial injustice, the film effectively connects the supernatural horror elements with real-world issues of racism and oppression. The decision to change the message of the story to be race-based rather than class-based is a powerful one as it allows the film to address systematic racism and the ways in which African Americans have been marginalized and persecuted throughout history. By centering the story on race, the film becomes a commentary on the enduring legacy of slavery and how it continues to shape the lives of African Americans in the present day. This shift in focus gives the film a deeper resonance and elevates it beyond mere horror entertainment to a social commentary on race relations in America. Moreover, it can be argued that Candyman would not exist as we know it if it were not for the if it was not known for the precedent set by the 1970 film Blackula. Blackula was, one of the first mainstream horror films to feature an African American protagonist and address themes of race and identity within a horror framework. By paving the way for films like, Candyman, Blackula demonstrated that horror could be used as a tool to explore deeper social issues and give voice to marginalized communities. The movie Candyman, it's a timeless classic that continues to resonate with audiences due to its powerful message about race, racism, and the enduring legacy of slavery in America. By changing the message of the story to be race-based rather than class-based, the film tackles important societal issues and sheds light on the experiences of African Americans in a predominantly white society. The influence of films like Blackula cannot be overstated as they paved the way for groundbreaking social commentary found in Candyman. As we continue to grapple, with issues of race and racism in society, films like Candyman serve as important reminders of powerful storytelling to provoke thought, ignite empathy, and inspire change. Another horror villain who probably wouldn't exist without Blackula is someone who's just as terrifying and yet sympathetic in a very Frankenstein's monster type of way, and that movie character is Bones. Also, I'm gonna tell you guys at the end, I always have a conclusion by the end of these freaking episodes. These films' narratives are very different. I think the narratives are very different, but they all have one thing in common, and I promise it's all going to make sense by the end of it. So we could get into Bones now. Bones is a cult classic horror movie released in 2001, directed by Ernest R. Dickerson and starring rapper Snoop Dogg in the lead role. This movie rocks, alright? This movie it's I cannot overstate how much this movie is awesome, alright? Go watch it. The film follows the story of Jimmy Bones, a charismatic and respected neighborhood figure who is betrayed and murdered by his own friends. Years later, his spirit returns from the dead, seeking revenge on those who wronged him. Basic synopsis of the film. Telling you guys, go freaking watch it. The creators of Bones took inspiration from blaxploitation films of the 1970s. Combining elements of horror, thriller, and black cinema to create a unique and chilling story, the movie is set in the fictional neighborhood of Sangria, a rundown area plagued by crime and poverty, reflecting the struggles of the African American community set in an urban environment. Snoop Dogg delivers a standout performance as Jimmy Bones, portraying the character with a mix of charm and menace that keeps the audience captivated throughout the film. Supporting cast includes actors like Pam Grier, Clifton Powell, and Callie Kane, who all brings and depth and complexity to their roles. One of the key messages of Bones is the theme of betrayal and loyalty, as Jimmy Bones is ultimately betrayed by those closest to him. The movie also explores the consequences of greed and corruption, as the characters' actions lead to tragic consequences that comes back to haunt them. Bones is a thought-provoking and entertaining film that combines elements of horror, urban drama, and revenge thriller. With its stylish values, engaging performances, and powerful message, the movie has become a cult favorite amongst fans of the horror genre. The connection between Bones, Blackula, and Candyman may not be immediately as apparent as these films have, different narratives. However, upon closer examination, it becomes clear that there are underlying similarities that tie these films together. One of the key aspects that connect Bones, Blackula, and Candyman is their exploration of societal issues through the lens of horror. Each film delves into themes of race, identity, historical trauma, shedding light on the struggles faced by marginalized communities. Released in 2001, Bones, which stars rapper Snoop Dogg as the vengeful ghost of the slain gangster,
The film addresses urban gentrification, gang violence, and the cycle of poverty that plagues inner city communities. On the other hand, Blackula, released in 1972, is a blaxploitation horror film that reimagines the Dracula myth within a black cultural context. The film follows an African prince who is turned into a vampire by Count Dracula and later wreaks havoc in a modern-day Los Angeles. Blackula explored themes of identity, displacement, and the legacy of slavery in America. Similarly, Candyman, released in 1992, is based on Clive Barker's short story, The Forbidden. It's set in a Chicago project, and it follows the story of a vengeful spirit who haunts that project. The film addresses issue of urban decay, gentrification, the intersection of race and class in America. Despite their divergent storylines and settings, all three films share a common thread in their exploration of the horrors of the past manifesting in the present. They serve as allegories for the lingering effects of historical trauma, systematic oppression, and societal injustice. By blending elements of horror with social commentary, these films challenge conventional genre norms and provide a platform for marginalized voices to be heard. In the terms of historical context, the 1970s saw a rise in blaxploitation cinema, with films like Blackula gaining popularity amongst black audiences. These films were instrumental in providing the representation for black actors and filmmakers in a predominantly white industry. Similarly, the 90s witnessed a resurgence of horror films, with Candyman emerging as a standout example of the genre. Key figures in the genre of horror cinema, such as director Bernard Rose and actor William Marshall, have made a significant contribution to the field by pushing boundaries and challenging stereotypes. Their work has paved way for a new generation of filmmakers to explore diverse perspectives and narratives within the horror genre. The connection between Bones, Blackula, and Candyman lies in their shared exploration of societal issues through the lens of horror. These films serve as powerful reflections of the struggles faced by marginalized communities and the enduring legacy of historical trauma. By delving into themes of race, identity, and oppression, these films challenge traditional genre norms and offer a platform for underrepresented voices to be heard. As the genre of horror cinema continues to evolve, we can expect to see more films that tackle societal issues and social issues and conversations that push boundaries in new and innovative ways. In the realm of horror films, there are certain characters and stories that stand out for their portrayal of race relations and the past coming back to haunt the present. Films like, Bones and Candyman and Blackula delve into these themes, using horror as a platform to tell compelling narratives that resonate with audiences. These characters, like I mentioned earlier, they have a Frankenstein monster type of eye, representing their complex and multifaceted nature, which kind of adds depth to the stories being told. The historical context, which in these films were made, is a crucial understanding to their importance. During periods of social upheaval and civil rights movement, the artists were often used their platforms to address pressing issues such as racism and discrimination. Blackula, for example, was released in 1972, a time when African American representation in media, specifically mainstream media, was limited. The film offered a unique take on the vampire genre, showcasing black protagonists in a leading role. The representation was groundbreaking at the time and paved the way for more diverse storytelling in horror. Similarly, Candyman explores the legacy of slavery and its impact on contemporary society. The character of Candyman himself represents a manifestation of the horrors of the past, seeking vengeance for the injustices suffered. By linking the past to the present, the film forces audiences to confront uncomfortable truths about race relations and enduring legacy of slavery. Bones takes a different approach, focusing on the idea of redemption and second chances. The character of Bones returns from the dead to seek justice for the betrayal he faced in his life. His story is one of betrayal, revenge, and ultimately redemption. By intertwining these themes of power and corruption, the film offers a nuanced take and impact of the present through these characters and narratives. Audiences are forced to confront their own biases and preconceptions, leading to a deeper understanding of the complexities of race relations. In terms of key figures, directors, and writers, they play a crucial role in shaping the narratives of these films. Figures such as Bernard Rose, who directed Candyman, and Ernest Dickerson, who directed Bones, they bring unique perspectives to their storytelling. Their creative vision and dedication to exploring important themes have helped to elevate these films beyond typical horror fare. By engaging with these stories, audiences are challenged to think critically about the issues being presented and reflect on their own beliefs and attitudes towards race. The impact of these films cannot be, understated at all. They have sparked important conversations about race, history, and identity, forcing, the audience, me, you, everybody to confront uncomfortable truths and re-examine our own perspectives. By using horror as a vehicle and a platform to, tell a story, these films have opened up new possibilities for representation in the genre. The success of these films also paved the way for more voices and diverse, talents to be heard and seen in the industry, leading to a richer and more inclusive cinematic landscape. Looking to the future, it would be fascinating to see more characters like those in Bones, Candyman, and Blackula take center stage in horror films. By embracing complex, nuanced portrayals of race, history, filmmakers can continue to push the boundaries of the genre and challenge audiences to think critically about the world around them. These characters with their Frankenstein monster type of eye, let's come back, offer a glimpse into the multifaceted nature of humanity and the stories that have yet to be told. As we move forward, it is essential that we continue to explore these themes in cinema, creating a more inclusive and thought-provoking cinematic landscape for all audiences to enjoy and engage with. And that is kind of all I have today. I know it wasn't the best and the audio was kind of wonky. I kept having issues with the mic while recording this. There's also a cat right above me who's snoring so freaking loud. It's awful. I'll try to remove some of the noises in the background, I don't know, with Wet App or a program, but I'll figure it out. But yeah, that's what I have. Past, present, and future type shit. I liked it. I also encourage everybody to go watch Blackula, Candyman. You can go ahead and watch the new one too. I mentioned it in the intro. I didn't really talk about it throughout this episode because I didn't really feel the need to at this moment. I wanted to do a whole episode kind of just about that movie in particular, just because I found it to be interesting, even within the aspect of the past coming back to the present, which is, the big theme of this episode. But the way I would talk about it for this new Candyman is a little bit different, as the other Candyman was directed by a white man. The story was written by a white man. And it's like, was it directed by a white man? I believe it was directed by a white man. But the point is, the fact that it was adapted the way it was, that's why, I don't know, there's just certain things that would make me talk about it in its own episode. But yeah, if you're interested in hearing more from me, go ahead and subscribe, like, and comment. Do anything to get me on your algorithm on your page. You could also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at hunnasmak on Twitter or on Instagram. Excuse me. Twitter is huskasmin it'll be in the description or even on the channel little thingy. Just go to my channel, it'll be on here. You can follow the podcast Twitter page at capital TCNP lowercase OD. And yeah, I am your host, hunnasmak, and this has been the Curious Native Podcast.